Thank you for asking me back again. I always love coming down here because I love talking about film, and you always have such great topics. And today I want to talk briefly about the transition of Jone's novel From Here to Eternity to the screen. You know, since film started, I mean, they've been adapting novels to film has always been there. I mean, from the very start of the medium, we've had that, and some of them have been far more successful than others. Every once in a while, you have a film like To Kill a Mockingbird that actually does capture the spirit of the novel and actually complements it. Other times, you have adaptations that I guess you say, well, that was a good try, and they become something else. Moby Dick being a good example of being, you know, if you look at it, you know, as a standalone film, it's a pretty good adventure movie. But obviously, if you compare it to Melville's novel with all of its symbolism and the lair, it doesn't even come close. So, you know, adaptations can be tricky. Every once in a while, you'll get one that actually improves on its source material greatly. And then every once in a while, you get a complete disaster. So adapting novels into films, they're a thorny prospect. And From Here to Eternity certainly did present more than its number of difficulties as far as trying to get this massive novel adapted to the screen. I mean, there were length problems, there were content problems, there were all sorts of problems as far as trying to get this novel, which I've read in its hardback form was about 870 pages long, down to a manageable film. We all know that a film script, usually one page of script equals 1 minute of time on the screen. So you don't want to really go over 120 pages. And certainly paring this thing down was really quite a task. Jones himself, of course, I won't belabor the point, you all know, I'm sure, from other talks earlier this week about the success of the novel, what it did for his life, what it did for his career. And when Hollywood came knocking, he wasn't too surprised. It was pretty much expected that someone would attempt this. Excuse me. Though he kind of thought that maybe it would happen at a later date. He didn't really know that it was going to happen as soon as it did after the publication of the book. The film came out in '53. I believe the book was published in '51. There we have a great picture. I found a great picture of Sinatra, Montgomery Clift. The gentleman in the middle with the book is Buddy Adler. He was the producer of the film, and there's Jones right there. They're standing for one of those wonderfully stilted still moments where they say, oh yes, everyone, take a look at the book there. There's Harry Cohn. He was the president of Columbia Pictures at this point in the 50s. He paid $82,000 for the rights of From Here to Eternity at that time, which was a huge amount of money. And everyone in the industry labeled this Cohn's folly. They said, there's no way you're going to be able to adapt this novel to where it's going to actually resemble the book into a film. You're going to have to take so many things out. This is a waste of money. You're wasting your time. Well, from everything I've read about Mr. Cohn, he was an incredibly stubborn, rude gentleman, and he did not take no for an answer. And he had various people take a crack at the novel as far as transforming it into a screenplay. Jones being one of them. He actually wrote a treatment for it itself. This is Daniel Taradish. He eventually, when all the dust was settled, he adapted the book into the screenplay that won him an Oscar. Obviously, as I had said before, he had to make a great many changes to the book. The language had to be cleaned up, for one thing. The suggestion that Donna Reed's character, Lorene, worked at a house of prostitution, well, we couldn't really say that, so it becomes a gentleman's club, and she's a hostess. The one thing that bothered director Fred Zinnemann most was the change that was made in the fate of Captain Holmes. Captain Holmes is the officer in charge of the division in which Montgomery Clift's character Pruitt is transferred to. In the film, he is forced to resign for his behavior in regards to the treatment of Pruitt. In the book, he's actually given a promotion. And Zinnemann just cringed at that. He said it was the worst change that they made because he knew how the Army worked, and he knew that this is how they would have treated that situation, not in making him resign. One element that isn't often talked about as far as a big change from the book to the movie is the fact that the Deborah Carr character, she has a son in the book. bad enough at, in 1953 that she's unfaithful to her husband, but they felt that she would be completely unlikable on the screen if she was a mother as well. So any mention of a son between them is completely gone. And at one point in the movie, if you remember, she's talking to Burt Lancaster about the pain of living in a house without any children. So I can see, it's pretty obvious why they made the change, to make her appear a little bit more sympathetic. But the thing that suffers because of that is the end of Jones's book. There's a wonderful passage at the end of the book that I have excerpt here. The final scene of the book has her and her son. They're sailing away from Pearl Harbor. And the son says, "Mother, do you think the war will last long enough so that I can graduate from the point and be in it?" "No," she said, I don't think it'll last that long." "Well, gee whiz, Mother," her son said, "I want to be in it." "Well, cheer up," Karen said, "and don't let it worry you. You might miss this one, but you'll be just the right age for the next one." "You really think so, Mother?" her son said anxiously. So, a great moment that was lost in trying to clean things up. And that is sometimes what happens when we have to translate these things into a different medium to fit into the mores of the time. There's Zinnemann there. What a great director he was. Harry Cohn did not want this man to work for him. But producer Buddy Adler insisted that his sensibility was the one that was going to capture the essence of this book. And he insisted that they hire Fred Zinnemann to direct the film there. He knew that he wasn't going to get along with Cohn either. And he insisted. Their first battle came over the casting. But before I get to that, let me just back up a little bit. Zinnemann, probably the movie that made his name or really got him the first sense of prominence, was The Search in 1948, which was Montgomery Clift's first film. Some people list it as his first film. Others list Red River as his first film, but they were made back to back, and usually the release date of Red River is listed before. Also High Noon, of course, a great Zinnemann film, which he made right before From Here to Eternity. This is, can anyone tell me who this is? Yeah, I couldn't have told you either. Aldo Ray. This is Aldo Ray, who was under contract at Columbia at the time of the making From Here to Eternity, and had Harry Cohn had his way, he would have had the part of Pruitt. Zinnemann said, "There's no way that this was going to happen," and he said, "We need to offer this part to Montgomery Clift." Cohn's response was, "You're out of your mind. This guy doesn't look like a soldier. He doesn't look like a boxer, and more than likely, he's a homosexual. There's no way he's going to be in this movie." Zinnemann basically walked out of his office, leaving Cohn screaming, and he said, "Look, if you don't offer him the role, I'm off the picture." Cohn relented, sent Clift the script the next day, apparently, and he was signed. His salary for the movie at this point was $150,000, which was quite a good paycheck back then. They also had a little interesting battle with Joan Crawford. Cohn had initially cast her in the Deborah Kerr role. There are a couple myths surrounding this as well. She was actually signed. She was going to be in the film, and there's one myth that says that she quit the film over the costumes that she was going to have to wear. Other people say, well, yes, she was temperamental, but that's just silly. More than likely, they say that she left the film because she knew that she wasn't going to get top billing in the movie, and that she was worried about certain raw elements that her character was going to have to display at that point. Cohn suggested that perhaps they go to Joan Fontaine for the role, or perhaps Jennifer Jones. Adler said, well, what about Deborah Kerr?